What's going on, guys? If you saw the last video, kind of my testimonial about TEXIT, which I hope you did, it was more of a serious kind of explanatory video. This is going to be a little bit more laid back, a little bit more fun probably. We're going to be going through some Instagram comments, some comments on Facebook, different places around the internet, and kind of rebuttaling or explaining some things about TEXIT. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, guys, and first off, the Dallas Morning News did post a image on Instagram talking about TEXIT. So I'm going to read you some of the comments that are on here and kind of give my thoughts, rebuttals, whatever on those. So let's dive into it. First off, first comment: couldn't even keep the power on for most of the state, and now they want to be their own independent republic. Okay. So there are a bunch of comments like this all around the internet, so we're going to go ahead and address this right now. First off, out of all the states that have had power issues across America, whenever this happened, I said one thing that would be different with it happening in Texas. That one thing is that as soon as it was all over, any issue that caused this was going to be addressed, and it pretty much has. They've had reform at ERCOT already. They've had discussions on the power grid itself. They've looked at updating technologies and weatherproofing better. They've looked at the reason that the weatherproofing failed. They looked at the consumption and distribution of green energy during this whole thing. And a lot of people wanted to blame this on one specific thing or another. It was multifaceted, and it was a once in a generation storm that knocked out the power for most people for one day. Personally, we were on a rolling blackout situation where the power would go out for about 15 to 20 minutes and would be back on for about 20 to 30 minutes. And that would roll through pretty much the majority of the day. Luckily, our water did kind of get shut off a couple of times because of the power to the pumps, but we tried to keep everything flowing as much as possible. When the power was on, we did have some heat going. I did have some firewood, so we had some fire burning in the fireplace, and we survived. And some people didn't fare as well. There was a lot of damage done and even some lives lost, and that's always a tragedy, but that's dealing with Mother Nature. And it's hard to put any of the blame on the Texas government itself or even Texas industry. Yeah, you can second guess companies for not better weatherproofing their systems, but again, it's a once in a generation storm that led to multiple days below freezing, which Texas usually does not get. So saying that we can't control our power system is completely false. And we've been doing it. We've had our own system forever, and we've been managing that really well, even though places in the Northeast have had rolling blackouts before. California definitely has had rolling blackouts. And they say, and a lot of the critics say, if we were tied into the grid across the country, that we could have drawn power from within there. But all of our neighboring states were having the same issues, hit with the same storm, and there was no way that we could have drawn enough power from those to mitigate the rolling blackouts that we did have. So again, the solutions that were proposed in criticism to Texas's system would not have worked anyways. We would have still had issues. So it's a frustrating and false argument that is being thrown around all over the internet. The very next comment: anyone who paid attention in 7th grade Texas history knows this is a silly idea. I assume they're just talking about Texas being a republic before, when Texas got its independence from Mexico. We weren't a rich country by any means. very poor, is very sparse land, very hard land to get arable. The biggest industry was ranching and cattle trade, and quite frankly, Texas needed the United States to absorb it so that it didn't go into massive debt or was a little bit more safe from future wars. So we were only a republic for, I think it was 4 or 5 years before becoming statehood, which we were lobbying for almost right away. And again, it's a different time, completely different circumstances there. So I would say, again, a different time. Now Texas has one of the largest industries in the world. If it was its own country, I think it would be in the top, at least top 10, if not like top 5 industries in the world. It's got GDP way over most countries. We have a very diverse technology and economy. So we're not just dealing with oil here. We have all kinds of technology, healthcare professions, and a very wide range of jobs and economic opportunity. So to say that we would have the same struggles that we had in the 1800s is laughable. The next comment said we could give the land back to Mexico if we're so desperate to leave the US, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, Texas declared its independence from Mexico because of a harsh tyranny that Mexico was back then. And Mexican politics these days are not too much better, with the drug cartels running lots of land in Mexico. If Texas became a part of Mexico again, I assume Texas would be running a lot of Mexico. That's probably maybe a naive stance to take, but not something that people are talking about or interested in, so just kind of a stupid comment there. The next comment is that state officials running Texas are some Looney Tunes, and maybe you wouldn't think that if you paid more attention to your local representatives and state representatives. All too often in the US, we pay way too much attention to federal elections, your senators, your federal House members, and the presidency, which is not the way that it was really designed to be with federalism. You should be much more concerned with who your governor is, who your city councilmen and mayors are, and a lot of that stuff gets thrown by the wayside and everybody focuses on the presidency. So if Texas was a republic and the president was what is now the governor, you would focus more on who's your governor, but then you also probably focus more on who's running the county, who's running the city, who are your council members. I would hope that that would be the case, because local government is really where the government is that should affect you the most, because it's also where you have the most say-so. Again, another good luck with the electricity. Let's talk after you figure out how to keep the power on. This one's talking about while people are dying from COVID and houses are damaged, houses and infrastructure are damaged from ice storms and flooding. This is what the government seems to focus on. And first off, the government's not focusing on this. It's basically a couple of lawmakers trying to put this into a vote from the people. And again, it's something for the people to decide, not the government. So that's all they're trying to do, is just get it out there so that we can talk about it, which is why I'm making these videos. Do I need a passport to go to Oklahoma? So I've seen other similar questions to this on, are you going to need a passport to go back to the US? What if you're getting benefits from the US currently? A lot of things like that. And maybe you'll need a passport to get back into the US. I would assume that most people would have a dual citizenship, where you're also a citizen of the United States still, but also a citizen of Texas, at least for people who are already citizens. That happens a lot around the world, so I don't see it being a huge issue with Texas going as a republic. As far as benefits and things like that you're getting from the federal government, I assume that if we transition over, a lot of those would still be guaranteed. or paid by the state government. And those that are saying the state government won't be able to afford that, in the long run, you're probably right. But in the short term, we could probably take care of everybody that's already been guaranteed something to keep that going for them, at least for a certain amount of time. Stuff like Social Security and other stuff that are lifetime benefits, we could probably, for a certain amount of people, keep that going. Then it comes down to what's the point of breaking off and becoming a republic if you're just going to keep all the same flaws that the United States has at the moment. So I would assume a lot of those things would change, but we would try to also honor guarantees that were made to you. But a lot of that stuff's going to be up in the air anyways, because again, this is just discussing the possibility about it, not the specific details of what's going to happen. Can't keep the power running. This is stupid. Literally taught my 5th graders about when we were a republic today. We begged for statehood, lost many lives in 1845. Can we learn from history? Again, this isn't 1845. This is 2021. It's a big difference, okay? So again, a lot more about the power, about Texas history. Now we're on Facebook on another post about TEXIT, and somebody says, we almost died a few months ago, and this is the solution, ? I'm voting for Matthew McConaughey. I brought this one up because I've actually suggested that if we are gonna TEXIT and we become a Texas Republic, Matthew McConaughey would be a fantastic first president. Even if I don't agree 100% with policies that he might think, I think he's a great ambassador for the Texas culture, and I think the culture is way more important than the specific policies and politics. And saying we almost died a few months ago, probably referring back to the ice storm and stuff like that. Again, I don't know what else I can say about that except for it's Mother Nature. I don't know how is anybody else going to handle it any better. There are some totally down with being an independent republic, TEXIT. There are some comments out there, but most of these are not, and a lot of that comes down to where I'm reading the comments from, being a major newspaper. And even though there are a lot of comments for it, I'm trying to pick out some of them that are against it to kind of rebuttal in this video. Texas is thinking backwards: COVID rules, gun laws, and now this. So gun laws, we have the right to bear arms, we have the right to have guns. We fought very hard for things like that, and there's not a huge gun problem in Texas. There are in other places around the country maybe, but in Texas it's not really a big issue like it is in other places. And the COVID-19 rules, hello, we're open, we're doing fine. People dying is a tragedy, obviously, but people being locked in their homes, not being able to go to work, not having a functional economy is a tragedy as well. And who's to say that an independent Texas Republic would have made any different decisions than the federal US government did? Again, it all comes down to the people and what they think, but at least we'd be making those decisions for ourselves as Texans instead of having somebody in Washington, D.C. making those decisions. This one says, and I've seen a couple of like these, then the United States can invade Texas for our oil and gas. I've seen that one. I've seen, you know, should the United States invade Texas? Will Mexico invade Texas? Will China invade Texas? And I would assume that with Texas becoming its own republic, we're not burning bridges with these other countries that we already deal with. We're going to have a lot still in common with the United States. The United States should be an ally. Canada will be an ally. Mexico will be an ally. And they're not going to attack Texas. If that was the case, they wouldn't let Texas go in the first place. And other countries aren't going to try to attack Texas because the United States is still one of the largest armies in the world, and they're not going to let that happen. There's a couple other really good ones that I saw. Let me try to find them. This one says, wouldn't this technically be considered treason if elected officials are actively pursuing secession? My rebuttal to that is, yeah, it might be. It just kind of depends on the angle that you look at it and the angle that you're approaching it. I don't think anybody that's pushing TEXIT is asking for a civil war or a revolution, especially not a physical revolution, because Texas, as big as it is and as powerful as it is, couldn't compete with the entirety of the United States in a war situation. The Constitution is a contract between the U.S. federal government and the people, but it's also a contract between the U.S. federal government and the states. And contracts, just like contracts with companies or a marriage contract, can be broken. And what a lot of people are suggesting is not that we have any kind of war, but we have a peaceful divorce. And in divorces, you break your contract, you divvy up property, you set new rules and boundaries, and that's exactly what Texas needs to do, in my opinion. So the initial act could be considered treasonous, but if you approach it the right way, you could get away with doing it without committing treason, if that makes sense. Yeah, another one that I see a lot is talking about federal money coming into Texas and FEMA money, stuff like that. But Texas is one of the few states that actually pays back to the federal government more than it receives in subsidies. And quite frankly, it would be stupid of Texas not to take certain things from the federal government, as it is a state, if they're being offered, but could definitely still run itself without those if necessary. But because of how much the federal government takes, anytime we get the opportunity to get back is a smart just business play. So all the talk about Texas receiving federal money, Texas would be just fine as a country without receiving money from the United States government. This is a good one. Anyone supporting this is no patriots. They don't believe in America anymore. Never did or never did. These people are fools and don't deserve any attention. Well, you just gave them attention by commenting, but I disagree. I think that TEXIT is kind of the ultimate patriotic idea, as long as it's in line with the kind of founding ideas. To say that you don't believe in America anymore is probably an accurate statement. To say you never did is probably an inaccurate statement. The whole point is that we do believe in the American founding and the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and we see those being shattered. Federalism, as it was an experiment, and it seems that that experiment has not succeeded. And the whole idea from the founding is self-government, and if the federal government is trying to assert more and more power to the states, then it only makes sense that the states would eventually rebel, and that is a completely American idea. This one says, with no income tax and a flat tax on property and sales, question mark. By 1845, we were begging for statehood, independence from Mexico, in only a decade. Good luck, and don't think we'll be allowed to keep the National Guard or military bases either. So to touch on, and again, this isn't 1845, this is 2020, big difference. But with no income tax and just a flat tax on property, I would assume that if we became our own republic that we would reform our tax system. I would assume it wouldn't look too dissimilar to what is out there. I would hope that we would take the opportunity to at least engage in conversation of different kind of taxing ways, to have a flat income tax. Herman Cain's 999 plan was always interesting to me. Having just a sales tax or just a property and sales tax could work. There's definitely a lot of different directions that we could go there, and we don't have to stick with what we have as a state, because those tax purposes are based on what the state needs, not what a country would need. So there's no question that there would be a conversation about new taxes. And the whole National Guard or military bases thing, again, just like a divorce, you would split things up. If they're a National Guardman from Texas, they would probably stay in Texas. If they're military members from Texas, they would probably want to stay in Texas. They might not, they could go to other bases. America obviously has bases in other countries. If they wanted a base and we allowed them to have bases in Texas, they could probably still do that. Again, that would be all part of a negotiation of the divorce itself. And then again, some more comments about the Confederacy and the Civil War and what we did in the breakup of the Civil War. So again, completely different circumstances, completely different reasoning behind all of that. It's just not fair at all to compare what the movement is trying to do now to what's happened in history. So that's all that I really want to go through today. I don't want this video to be too long. If you've got more questions or comments that make sense and not something that are already kind of talked about or rebutted, if you want to rebut my rebut, please feel free to do so in the comments below. Let me know what you're thinking out there. Let me know what you think about our ideas here about the TEXIT. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos coming out. We'll definitely have more videos on TEXIT, on the movement, on politicians here in Texas pushing it. I'd love to go through some of the other testimonial videos that other people have posted about TEXIT. If you haven't seen my testimonial video, is the one posted right before this, so go back and check it out if you're interested. And as always, thanks for watching.